Bitcoin craze of 2017, 2018, when people started tracking Bitcoin rates almost on a daily basis, it led to a fledgling industry of companies acting as exchanges for cryptocurrencies and a huge growth in the number of investors. There is an estimate that at one point there were 5 million investors from India in cryptocurrencies. Then the RBI in 2018 issued a circular that effectively led to the entire industry shutting shop. Today, the Supreme Court, after a nearly 2-year legal battle, has reversed that order. In its order, the top court says that the RBI's actions were disproportionate. So what does this mean for the Indian virtual currency industry? Is Bitcoin back? To speak more on this, I'm joined today by Naveen Surya, who's with the Internet and Mobile Association of India, the organization which was actually at the forefront of leading this legal fight against the RBI order. I'm also speaking with Manish Kumar, co-founder of Grex and RealX. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us today on the show. Naveen, let me begin by just getting your take on what the Supreme Court has said today and how you look at it. What does it mean?
I think it is actually, if you look at the whole order, it has two key substance. One, I think it clearly establishes that RBI does acted within its authority. RBI did its homework before acting. However, the actual action of circular, considering that none of their stakeholders were directly harmed, which is what they said that they have a kind of right and reason to protect, were really harmed or had any kind of a adverse issue. And probably that's where they found that there is a disproportionate action the RBI took, and that's where they thought that probably that circular can be set aside and the status quo can be restored. Also, some of the banks, out of abundant caution, had frozen certain bank accounts, which also led to huge inconvenience to not just exchanges but consumers. So some of those are the things which actually court said that probably they need to fix. But so it's a mixed bag. It also helps RBI to reestablish their position that they are the authority when it comes to even subject like cryptocurrency.
Hey, Manish Kumar, just your take on the order and what it means for the industry. It's been a long haul in the sense that fledgling industry pretty much shut down. What was the kind of impact that you faced, and what are your plans up ahead now?
Yeah, so this is interesting in many ways. While we have not read the verdict completely, but where I would like to give pointers on is the signaling that this verdict in principle gives. Two or three things that really stem out of the verdict. One is obviously the impact on the cryptocurrency industry, and some part of the impact is also dependent on what further down action the government or the RBI takes. The other is what really happens to the other applications that are on blockchain or tokens, etc. And the third one is more principled, based on how our regulators have been imagining themselves or acting or behaving, with respect to innovation in financial technologies. So I would take up the last part, first. In terms of one, what it establishes as a verdict is that there has to be a principle of fairness and equal opportunity. As Naveen said, proportionate reaction from the regulator is expected by everyone, not just the incumbent entities who are regulated, by everyone who is not regulated as well.
Yeah.
In this case, it was clearly out of that proportion. Number two is there is a check to regulatory authority. When I say that, what I essentially mean is regulatory laws are one step lower to the laws that are guaranteed by the Constitution. Now, if you are guaranteed to, in some sense, to innovate and to trade in the country, then until that has been, in principle outlawed, which in this case would have meant that you recognize the cryptocurrency first as an asset and then say this asset is not welcome and things like that, etc. Until that is done, you just cannot stifle any entity, or in this case, it was a full industry. So regulatory authority needs some checks and balances in this case.
Which, Manish, to be fair, exist in our system as it is. It's not the first or the last time that the RBI's decisions have been challenged in court. But then, perhaps that's a discussion for another day. Just
In this case, Naveen represented because there was a full industry and a lot of dollars at
yeah,
risk.
yeah.
But think about innovations that are happening on a day-to-day basis on multiple other fronts, which may not have had 5 million users, or maybe too nascent in today. So there are many examples where the regulatory drag, or what is called the void, that is created, and sometimes it is left like that intentionally, because the impact of regulatory drag is different in a developed country like US and is different in a country like ours.
I want to cut to
In
the
a
chase. No, I get your point, but I want to cut to the chase on a couple of things. Let me come to Naveen first on this. The basis for the RBI's actions, and remember, the RBI directed entities that it regulates to not sort of create an opportunity or not engage with those indulging in exchange of cryptocurrency. So it shut the back end. Effectively, the RBI shut the back end. So you could not buy or sell. Or you could buy, but you could never sell. You couldn't trade. Now, the concern behind that was that you were creating an alternate payment system of sorts, which was not under the regulator. I remember at that time clearly the RBI also saying that we are not closing other doors to cryptocurrency, but it needs to be under us or under the government of India. It can't be XYZ suddenly starting this. That was the concern. Do you think that concern is still on the table, Naveen?
I think even to some extent, Supreme Court has reiterated that, of course, RBI has all the right to regulate, and so does SEBI and other relevant regulatory authorities on a specific subjects. Let's say trading comes under their part, payment comes under RBI's part, overall monetary policy and anything that is like an instrument of money comes under RBI. If you really read through this 180 page, there are a lot of interesting stuff there. One thing, in fact, they also referred, which is very interesting, is that nowhere across the globe, people have even been able to do justice to even definition of virtual currencies. And there's still debate going on. Everybody agrees that it's a digital representation of value, which also is pretty generic, and there are a lot of other definition variants which exist. And actually, Supreme Court compared it with a scenario of some sort of a one elephant and four blind man. Everybody is looking at in bits and pieces, while systems like these, which are completely innovative, needs to be looked at to a very different perspective and probably with more open eyes. And there's always a fear, and regulators always try to protect, let's say, a lot of systems and a lot of let's say, stakeholders. But in this case, like RBI said, that probably one thing which was the acting to indirectly ban it, which wasn't exactly the ban. So they also say that we agree that RBI had all the authority to regulate it, but whether they have authority enough to even ban it in an indirect way, they were not very sure. It's a very interesting line that they have written somewhere there. Similarly, they said that there has been some discussions that were ongoing, and a lot of possible regulatory solutions were suggested to mitigate the risk which exists. So we're not saying that the cryptocurrency or a trading in the cryptos is full of, let's say, free of risk. It is not. But there has been discussions and details given out by the industry that how do you manage KYC, how do you mitigate risk, how do you provide right information to the consumers, and a lot of other things. I think somewhere those were not, let's say, discussed enough or not looked into to kind of put a right framework. These were the two main reasons why we challenged even the authority of RBI, but there they clearly said that RBIs have a clear authority here.
Manish, you're talking, Naveen spoke about telling people or engaging people or informing people, but the fact is that that whole cryptocurrency wave and craze that I talked about in the beginning of this conversation, the 2017, 2018 sort of mania. So a lot of people who did not understand the B of Bitcoin, putting in money because it was a fad, it was a trend. We're talking about these 5 million investors, and obviously there's no data to show how many actually knew what they were doing, but it was concerning. Now, do you see this business starting up again? Do you see a comeback of cryptocurrency, and what will you do to ensure that you don't have that kind of mania again? You will remember the times when, rates were going berserk on a daily basis and people bought into that.
Okay, so before we answer this in the perspective of cryptocurrency, Let's go back in the era of 2004 to 2007 times, maybe slightly before 2004, and what was happening in real estate. Something exactly similar was happening in real estate, maybe not with this ferocity, maybe not with this speed, but in terms of the value of underlying being ascertained and transacted had no bearing whatsoever with any event in the fundamental economy, if that is what we are trying to say. But that was allowed, and many people became rich because of that. Neither am I justifying this, neither am I saying that that this is completely wrong. But there are other examples of profiteering where there was lack of regulation. The other example that we need to understand, is what happened when Paytm was doing very well, and suddenly the KYC regime was enforced on them. It suddenly slowed down. So one of the things that RBI immediately should have done to get it more under its control was mandate KYC. They needed to first know what is happening before conclude what we all must be doing. No data is available. There is nothing that they had to judge this way or that way. And I think there were fair bit amount of simple tools that, if implemented immediately, would have calmed down the nerves. This is one side of the story. The other side, there are regulators like MAS in Singapore, etc., who have handled this very delicately, and they've done a fair bit good job at that. Essentially what they have said is that as far as you're doing a payments activity, you come under the Payments Settlement Act,
Yeah.
etc. As far as you're doing security activity, you are in this act, etc., etc. So if you couple one or two of these initiation steps, even as guidelines to begin with, things would have ebbed, a lot of information would have come out, and then any action along with discussions with the incumbent players, that would have assuaged the
Right.
regulatory concerns, would have been the right ones.
No, okay, so let's now look forward. What happens next? Do you see all of that frenetic activity restarting, or you will see a bit of caution? What about all those, Bengaluru cafes which were accepting Bitcoin as payment? Will we see all of that happen again, or this will be a more mellowed down approach? And of course, sooner or later, the government, the RBI, will have to come up with a set of guidelines. You can't just hope this will go away. Cryptocurrencies are not going away anytime soon.
I think there is a maturing of that happening across the world now. I mean, as I gave an example of Singapore, there it is not illegal, but it is not easy as well to get a license or to operate a cryptocurrency. So in some sense, they have been able to calibrate what is happening with the cryptocurrency, etc. But if a guy wants to, give you tea and, serve you tea and take Bitcoins for that, I don't see that is a big challenge, anyway. We should look forward and welcome it. The trading part of Bitcoin also has I think moderated. It has come down and it has come back up.
Yeah.
And I don't see much of a difference why you think a penny stock or something trades there, which you have no control on or have very little information, and versus something that people believe is a global asset in terms of trading.
Well, you're not doing it favors comparing Bitcoins to penny stocks. First, let me put that
I,
out.
I didn't want to say the real good ones.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
no,
just thought
I get the point you're making. I get the point you're making. I'm not sure if the suspicion is going to end, but Naveen, before I end this chat, just your take of how you see things panning ahead. You've had this victory, but the victory has also come because the government or the RBI did not have any guidelines in place, so they could not justify this action without any guidelines in place or any real proof of adversity or harm caused by cryptocurrencies. They can fix that. There can be now guidelines and rulings in place if they really don't want it to go ahead. So how do you see this panning out?
So I think two things. We were always in favor of all these activities to be regulated, and like Manish explained, that there are different regime for regulation for different activities. That has to be in place for it to really thrive and grow. That said, let's also not forget, if we are going to be the digital country and which needs digital economy, the cryptocurrency is going to be an important part of it. So we need to nurture this in a certain calibrated, let's say, balance between growth, innovation, and risk. I mean, you can't take just one dimension and say that, hey, let's just close our eyes to it and then say that there is no risk because it is banned. That doesn't happen. It only creates more illegal activities. So one is creating a framework, and that said, again, one of the key reasons, again, Supreme Court gave this order was because this activity per se is not illegal in the country, and that can only be done by a legislation. And we should not forget that there is a draft legislation or a bill already in the parliament, which is expressly seeking to ban all private cryptocurrencies. So again, unless that gets again rediscussed, this will be a temporary or a very shallow victory, because you start, but again, you don't know what the future is till the clear fate on that bill is also known. So I think that considering all the facts that are put in this order, I also believe that the right people in the parliament also relook at everything, rediscuss with all the stakeholders and say that, hey, how do we live with a balanced approach of a growth, innovation, as well as, let's say, the managed risk. And I think that's where the industry players are willing to very closely work with them. And by the way, this is a one rare such occasion where we've completely taken a view and kind of took it against the RBI in a court. But everywhere else that we work, whether it's a payments matter, whether it's a fintech matters, we're working very closely with them. And out of like 90 cases, 89 probably we have resolved working with them, including KYC issues that was just mentioned by other colleagues. So I think it's just about starting a process of re-dialogue and getting it right. I think it's critical for our economy and the country and for our digital future of the country.
All right, is it critical or not as far as the government is concerned is something we'll have to wait and see. When the finance minister was asked about it today at a news conference, Nirmala Sitharaman said she hasn't seen the entire judgment yet and will wait to respond and go through the Supreme Court order first. So we'll have to wait and see if there's going to be another spanner in the works. Might be too early to start celebrating yet for the cryptocurrency industry. But yes, a big precedent set by the Supreme Court actually reversing a Reserve Bank of India order on cryptocurrencies.